Welcome to Weight Loss with Plants, brought to you by the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies. I'm your host, Sharme Ridley. Despite not feeling well for quite some time, many people don't realize that they have serious health issues until they finally go to a doctor. For our next guest, it was a trip to a medical professional that caused her to get serious about what she'd learned years before about the magic of a plant-based way of eating. In doing so, she reversed her type 2 diabetes, lost a lot of weight, and began helping others to transition to a plant-based lifestyle through her extensive development of plant-based recipes. Please welcome to the show, Tami Cockrell. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Tami.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So, Tami, weight loss for you came as a result of trying to control your health issues. Give us a brief background of your health and experiences that you've had before following a plant-based way of eating.
So my journey kind of really started in 2013. It was just days before Thanksgiving, and I went for my annual physical, and they hooked me up to an EKG machine, and they kept coming in. I must have been there 2 hours because they kept coming in to retest my blood pressure, and the results of that appointment was I ended up on blood pressure medication. And my doctor at the time had said to me that if I lost 30 pounds, I'd be able to come off, because I was really fighting about going on medicine. What can I do? Let me lower my blood pressure, blah, blah, blah. So he said, lose 30 pounds and you'll come off of it. So that next year I lost 10 pounds, which was a struggle. I mean, it's hard to count calories and try and cut back and whatever else. But I lost 10 pounds by the end of the year when I went back for my next physical. And then I lost another 10 the following year. And then my kids kind of came into it, and my children were looking at eating healthier. My youngest one in biology class was learning about GMOs, which I'd never heard of a GMO before. And so he was bringing this information home, and Mom, I can't eat that, and I won't eat this, and it's got to be organic, and it's got to be GMO. And that kind of spun into them wanting, my children are activists, and that kind of spun in them wanting us to watch these documentaries. And I thought it would be all this animal cruelty stuff that I really didn't want to watch. But instead it wasn't. It was forks over knives and, fat, sick, and nearly dead, and all of those videos that were out at that point. So we were fighting it and whatnot. And then we ended up watching them. I was really sick at Christmas time. I always got sick between Christmas and New Year's, to where I was in bed for a couple weeks. And my father-in-law was in the hospital, which he ended up passing a week or so later. And my husband sat downstairs, my kids got him to watch it, and he binged for 8 hours. So the first time I came downstairs to just get water and some food for myself, he made me sit down and watch these. And immediately Forks Over Knives was the first one. And I just started Googling doctors that were in Forks Over Knives. And I signed up immediately for going to a lecture conference out here in LA that Dr. Esselstyn was going to be speaking at, and Chef AJ was going to be doing a demo at, and whatnot. And it kind of changed our lives, but we only gave up meat at that point. And I noticed that my weight loss at this point, I had lost 20 pounds over 2 years. My weight loss had kind of stalled. And I only lost 6 pounds that year, which I lost kind of in the beginning before we really got vegetarian, because I noticed that I was using more oil and more cheese in all of the dishes that I was learning to make again. And I thought, well, I just got to go vegan, because that's all they're talking about is they use the words vegan, and I got to go vegan. And when we kind of went vegan, I realized that it was not any healthier from what I was learning. It still was loaded with oils and processed foods and a lot of pasta, a lot of high fat stuff. So I ended up switching doctors, and I had my appointment March of the following year. So 26 pounds in 3 years was what I lost at that point. And she basically just said to me, can we, I was fighting. She said, you're going to have diabetes. You're going to have heart disease. You're going to have all these things. You have an apple-shaped body, and there's no way around it. You're going to be on meds for life. you're going to have high cholesterol, whatever. And she said, and I was fighting. I'm like, I've watched all this stuff. I've seen this studies and whatnot. And I know that I can change my diet. And she said, no, you can't. These are just your genetics. And so she said, can I genetically test you? And I said, sure. And so we did. And my genes came back, and it stated that I'm in the highest risk category for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, high cholesterol, high LDL, high triglycerides, stroke, and dementia. I have 2 genes for Alzheimer's. One is an APOE3, which is a normal mutation. The other one is an APOE4, which is the high risk. I carry another couple genes which help clot your blood, which most dementia is vascular. So this and heart disease are all connected. And so I have 2 genes for clotting your blood, which also are very relevant in Alzheimer's in people. And I sat there and I cried. And not only that, but my labs came back, and my labs were absolutely horrible. They proved everything she was saying was true. So I sat there in disbelief. I didn't know what to do. I was crying,
Let me interrupt you here for a second.
Mm-hmm.
What did your lab say?
So my lab said that I had diabetes. I had a 7.1 A1C. My cholesterol was 266. My LDL was 181. Everything, I had high hematocrit and high red blood count, which is signs of clotting. I had a fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver. I haven't drank in over 35 years, so it was all food, which is all my doing. And I think that's why I just sat there and just fell apart. I did this to myself. And that was the hardest thing to really understand, that I was headed down a path that no matter the 26 pounds I lost, I was 4 pounds away from what my other doctor's goal was for me to come off my meds. And yet my blood pressure was higher than ever. I think at the time my blood pressure was 149/94. So it was, and that was on medication. And so, it was very discouraging. And I heard a lot of words about controlling and stabilizing my diabetes. And I heard a lot of words about all the different medications I had to go on. I was lucky enough that I have friends that are RNs. And so I had taken my labs before my doctor's appointment to my friends to kind of go through things. So I had a heads up of kind of what I was looking at. Everything was lit up in red, which is not a good thing, So, they kind of went through it, and it was really funny because both of them said to me, well, I'm really sorry, you're going to be on metformin and insulin eventually, and you're going to be on statins for life. And they're horrible for your body, Tami, and I just said, why do I have to do this? This is what I'm learning. And they both said, well, what do you expect? They said, you cut out two of your main food groups. And I said, and what do you think that's done? And they said, well, for one, you're not getting any protein. And I said, well, protein's normal on my labs. That's not my problem. Well, what about your calcium? And I said, I've never been a milk drinker, but look at my calcium is normal range too. So, their little arguments didn't fly. And so I came home and I did a lot of research. Insulin resistance was the one word that kept coming up, and I'd never heard of insulin resistance before. And, so I started researching insulin resistance, which led me to Mastering Diabetes. They have a free group on their free Facebook page that I went to. And on that page, somebody was commenting that they're starting a class and you could go and sign up. And so I went straight there and I wrote to them, and Robbie Barbaro called, and we had a long conversation to see if I was the right fit if I was in the right state of mind to make the changes that were going to be necessary to make so that I wasn't wasting my money. And I signed up right then and there, and the rest is history. Then I had some hard work to do.
So what was it about that program that you learned that helped you to finally turn things around?
So, they taught about insulin resistance. They taught about the causes of diabetes, which unfortunately, so many doctors that are trained doctors in our medical system are not trained on what really is causing diabetes. And so they kind of went on the background. I need to know what's going on. I need to understand and be able to wrap my head around a situation to make changes, and they made it very easy for me. But I'll tell you, I was kicking and screaming for a good month. I started the program on May 8th, which was about 2 months after I had started, I'd gone through, after my diagnosis. And after my diagnosis, which was really funny, is I went to my diabetic counselor and I took a book. I bought myself a book and I bought her a book of Neil Bernard's How to Reverse Diabetes. And I handed it to her and I said, can we talk about this? I'll pay for another appointment and I'll come back and see you in a couple of weeks and we can discuss this, but I want your opinion on whether or not you think, because I still wasn't sure. I thought that these people that can reverse their diseases by eating plants was like the Tupperware person that makes, 100,000 plus a year. Not very many people achieve that goal. And so I thought it was 1 in a million that were able to reverse their stuff. I didn't realize how easy it really is. And so she opened up the book and she said, this was published in 2007. And she pushed it back at me and she said, it's irrelevant. It's old news. And I said, no, it's more relevant than ever, now, because we're learning that this is the truth, that this is, what's going to help. So anyway, long story short, I did research. I found my way to Mastering Diabetes. They helped by helping us to understand what was going on in our bodies to begin with, what causes insulin resistance to begin with. And then from there, they taught us how to eat an anti-inflammatory, plant-based, a high carb, believe it or not, high carb, low fat diet. And once I got my head around it, which was probably a good month, something clicked and I put all my faith into the program. And within 4.5 months from the time I started, that includes that month I was fighting, 4.5 months, I reversed all of my ailments.
Oh, wow.
I was in normal range and off my medication.
Were you able to, so you were able to get off much of your medication as well?
Yes, I got off all my medication. The blood pressure medication came 3 months later, though. It was a little slower to get off of that. It was a little scary. My doctor wouldn't take me off of it. I went ahead and stopped it. My blood pressure went sky high initially. Then it came back down to, I was really low when I was on the medication. So I stopped it a second time and I haven't been on it since. So January of 2018 was the last time I took any medication for blood pressure. And August, I had stopped my metformin on my own. Again, doctor just wanted to trickle it down, but keep me on it. And the funny thing is that even today, I'm still in all normal ranges with my cholesterol bounces up and down, but I'm in all normal ranges with my A1C and my blood pressure, etc. And my doctor still writes me in her reports after our annual physicals that I have diabetes and that I'm refusing to take the meds that are prescribed to me.
And so how much weight have you lost during this whole process?
So I lost a total of 64 pounds. When I started the program, I was 26 pounds that I'd lost over 3 years. And then I started the program in May, and by the end of July is when I really noticed the weight loss and kind of like took notice and stood on the scale. I had lost an additional 30 pounds in just those couple of months, but it wasn't the weight loss so much, it was the inches. When you eat plant-based, you're eating so anti-inflammatory foods, that your body shrinks. So I might look in the mirror and I might see all the same rolls in my stomach that I had beforehand, but I went from a size, I was wearing an 18-20 and it was a very tight 20 to a size 14 in my pants. And my tops were 2X to fit around my waist, my guts, small up top. And then, so if I wore a 2X, it was big up top, but it fit my waist. And if I wore a 1X, it fit my top, but it was tight around the bottom. But those were my shirt sizes. And now I wear a large, straight across the board. And I've never been able to go into a store and pick clothes off of a rack because of my body composition. Pick clothes off a rack, go in and try them on and be able to purchase them. So that was just all very new to me, and it was amazing. I sat in the first time I decided I needed to go buy clothes because I could no longer roll my pants or put a belt tight enough around me to keep my clothes up. And I decided to go buy a couple things. I sat there and I bawled inside when I was able to just take clothes off the rack. And I mean, I first went to the plus sizes and I thought, okay, I'll get 1X. I probably have only lost a little bit of weight because 26 pounds in 3 years, I lost nothing. Here I lost 30 pounds, or 34 pounds. And, I was inches. I mean, so I went to the plus sizes, I picked out clothes and none of it fit. It was all like tense on me. I went into extra larges and they didn't fit. And I went into larges and I sat there in the dressing room and I bawled. And it was a good cry, but it was I just couldn't believe that the first time, I mean, this was back to years, my whole adult life, I had been large.
And people don't realize the emotional component associated
Correct.
with when you see milestones. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So my milestones came, sometimes they were just a few pounds apart. When I first started losing weight, I was 234 in 2013, I hadn't stood on a scale, so 2013 is my only gauge I can go by when I was first put on blood pressure medication. And here we're in 2017, but I stood on the scale. And the first time was when I gave birth to my second child, which was 227 pounds. And I thought I hadn't been there since I gave birth to him. I never lost my baby weight from my second child. And then I got to 210 pounds, which was when I found out I was pregnant with my second child. And when I gave birth to my first child was the pounds. And I tell you, that was really emotional because when I found out I was pregnant both times, I cried because I was such a big girl that I didn't want to be even bigger, gaining all this weight, with my pregnancy. So I wanted to be pregnant. I just didn't want to be fat and pregnant. And so then I got down to 204 pounds. And I was like, then I was really nervous because I had not been under 200 pounds my adult life, so I was like, oh, well, this is never going to go below 200, so when it got to 199, I lost it. I cried. I was like, I couldn't believe it, and then I got down to 187, which was where I got married. My husband and I had been together 13 years, had my first child by the time I got married. And I put my wedding dress on. I thought, okay, I'm at the weight where I was when I got married. I put my wedding dress on, and even though I was the same weight, the dress was so big on me. It was because I'd lost inches. I mean, that's the thing about plant-based eating is it's so anti-inflammatory that you're not carrying all that extra, inflammation in your body. So that was a big time too. And then from there, it's the 170. I just kind of stopped at 170, 174, and that's where my weight stayed. So, and I guess at that point I learned to eat to stabilize my weight. I think that in the beginning I was very apprehensive about what to eat, how much to eat, and I realized, 3.5 years later, I was still that same weight and living my life, full and eating big meals and not gaining the weight.
Right. And there were some other milestones that you encountered as well, because I know that you had knee problems all of your life from the time that you were young. How has that progressed?
So when I was 19 years old, I played sports all my life. And by the time I was 19, I had 2 surgeries on my knee, on my right knee. The first surgery was when I was 17. They took out half my cartilage. The second surgery was when I was 19. They took out the other half, and they found that I had a complete tear of my ACL. They didn't repair it at the time, and I chose not to repair it because it would have put me in a body cast for 8 months to a year. Back then, they took a tendon to stretch across, nothing like they can do for you now. But all the same, I've never repaired that. So I've been bone on bone since I was 19 years old with a complete tear of my ACL. My knee, I kind of went on and I water skied and I snow skied for a few more years, but come my late 20s, I wasn't able to snow ski and do things like I used to anymore. And I became more lethargic and I started putting the weight on. That's where the weight really started piling on. So I lived in constant pain. My knee was always dislocating. By the time I was 38, I was crying and begging for a knee replacement, which they would not do. I was too young to be a candidate for a knee replacement surgery. And then when I went to go to a doctor to have him kind of like see what he could do for me without the knee surgery, I ended up dislocating my other knee, and I tore my MCL and 2 tears in my meniscus. So, putting weight on your knees to begin with is a lot. Then to have those injuries on top of it really prevented me from doing a lot of stuff that I could be doing. So, I stood on the top of the Grand Canyon while my family walked down because I knew I couldn't, or I sat in the car and I thought, oh, what's another view of the Grand Canyon? This became a very sedentary lifestyle for me due to my injuries. I also had colds all the time. I was always sick. My allergies would flare and it would put me in bed for weeks on end. I had plantar fasciitis in both my feet at the time of my diagnosis. Goodness, I had a chronic cough. Oh, that was a huge one for me because both of my sons, and so my sons are 7.5 years apart. So one graduated high school in 2011, the other in 2018. And for both of them, they were in drama, and I couldn't sit through all of their performances. I would have to walk out because I couldn't control my cough. I just had this chronic cough. I'm not a smoker. I had this chronic cough that I could not control. And so constant sinus problems. I had bladder infections, yeast infections all the time. And when I started eating this way, all of that changed for me. But the biggest miracle was my knees, because I just thought, I get the whole allergies, you take the dairy out of it. Dairy's very responsible for most of the inflammation in our bodies. So once that was removed and the oils were removed, that stuff kind of went away. And I bought into that because that's what you hear on all these documentaries too, when people are talking about it. But the knees, that was the biggest surprise to me, because my knees are still bone on bone with a complete tear in my ACL. And the other one is stronger than the right one, but it still has damage in it. And to have no pain, to not have to pop ibuprofen around the clock anymore, which I didn't care what it was doing to my stomach. I needed the relief from the pain. When I took my kids to Disneyland, it would be 4 days in bed for me afterwards for my knee to recover from it. I would be so blown up and in so much pain. And now I go to Disneyland and I walk 28,000 steps in a day and walk back to my car and drive home and still have all this energy and no recovery time. So it's, those are just huge things that you don't even realize that this is going to help you.
Exactly. Wow, that is so motivational to hear that. Share with us your experience with transitioning to a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. I know that it was a process for your learning to cook and navigating social situations, allowing your taste buds to adjust, and so on. Talk to us about that.
So our transition started a year before, where we gave up meat. So I always tell people it feels like I went all in 100% overnight, but that's really not the truth. So it started where we gave up meat in 2016. I was diagnosed in March of 2017. I started mastering diabetes in May of 2017. And it probably wasn't until June that I got on board. So it's hard. And one of the things that I felt was difficult is when I ate the standard American diet, I never had a lot of cravings. I craved sugar, we all crave sugar, but I didn't crave a bag of chips. I didn't crave, a big, steak all the time. I guess I had some cravings, but not to where they are. When I started transitioning, I think that was the hardest thing, is all of a sudden I was craving like foods I didn't even like before, fried French fries, which I was not a big French fry person. I would have a side salad instead of the French fries a lot of times. So I started craving that. If my kids brought chips in, I would binge that bag of chips, which I never was a binge eater at all. I could eat a small piece of steak and whatever else. But here I felt like I was binging to get it gone. There was these mind games that went on that the psychological part of it is real, and it's hard. And all of a sudden you start craving things that you didn't like before because you're telling yourself you can't have them anymore. And so I would look at Robbie's plate, and anybody that knows Robbie Barbaro, he eats phenomenal. His labs are the best I've ever seen or heard of. They're better than raw doctors, that have tested their labs up alongside of him. But he's a fruitarian. And I haven't been a big fruit eater my whole life because I always thought fruit was sugar and I'd rather have chocolate if I was going to put the pounds on me. I didn't realize that it's a big difference. But so I would look at his bowls and I would think, oh, I can't eat that way. And then Cyrus was raw at the time I was in the program. And I just thought, yeah, I can't eat like that. I didn't eat vegetables. I ate steak and potatoes. I ate red meat primarily, and a lot of it. And my plates were very brown and white. And so here all of a sudden I'm being told I have to eat this color. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like color. I don't like this. I hadn't eaten broccoli since I was in 5th grade. So it was a big transition for me to get on board and learn how to eat salads without dressings, because dressings had too many calories and a lot of fat in them for someone with diabetes. So that was my thing, is I had to learn how to reverse my disease. And so I ate very simply initially. But then I thought, I can't eat like this. My family was fighting it. It wasn't their disease, it was mine. And yet I didn't want to cook 2 separate meals all the time. So they had to kind of get on board. And so we ate out a lot, and that was really difficult to do. But that gave them the freedom to choose what they wanted to eat, and me to choose what I wanted to eat. But it came down to where there's only maybe 3 places that I can eat locally, and only one thing on the menu I can eat, because they'll make it for me oil-free or as little minimal oil. Some places will put oil in their quinoa or their rice to keep it fluffy and not sticking together. So I set out to find a way to cook to appeal to my family, to get them to eat this whole food plant-based lifestyle versus vegan, and make it appealing for everybody. Like when I go to places, when I go to parties or potlucks or anything else, I make sure I take things for me. Like in the beginning, I would take like a 7-layer bean dip that I made all plant-based, no heavy fats or anything in it. And then I would take some tortillas that were just made with water and corn and lime juice. And I would cut them up and I would air fry them. And I would take them in a baggie for myself. So I had the option of eating that dip still with chips. So I wouldn't be tempted to eat the fatter chips. So you have to accommodate yourself and think of yourself. We go, for years and years and years, I hosted all the holidays for both sides of the family at my home. And then right before I was diagnosed, I gave it to my little sister-in-law who had young children to start doing the holidays for us. And I thought, woohoo, I won't have to cook these big old meals anymore. But I do. I cook an entire meal to take over to my sister-in-law's house to accommodate our lifestyle. And it's great because we have a variety in our family. We have vegetarians, we have vegans, we have sad eaters, and we have plant-based eaters with no oil. So our buffets look really nice these days, and they're really, really good. So, but I had to take food that everybody else would want to eat too. So you have to learn to cook in a way that's going to please those who are reluctant to want to give up their meat.
Now, this is a wonderful segue to ask you about what you are doing to help other people transition, because you're known for your Facebook group and for your cooking and for your dishes. How did all of that come about? And just talk to us about it.
Well, I tell you, Robbie was the one. He kept telling me, you need to start a page. You need to start a page. When I started cooking in a certain way, and I would post my pictures, and he'd say, that looks really good, and it's really, compliant, and you need to start a page where you can help others. I consider my page more of a transition page, because I will add recipes that have a higher fat content. They may have oil in it, but I say omit the oil, but it's everybody's option to what they do. I just choose to not have oil in my diet. So I'll have other things. I don't put desserts on there very often, because I think even if they're plant-based and they're compliant, they're still high fat, they're still high sugar. And they're still very addicting. And I kind of learned that. I started making a breakfast cookie that I just kind of started making daily, and it's not okay. And I put on a few pounds, so we stopped making the cookies in the house and went back to that for me. So for me, I don't post a lot of recipes for desserts. Maybe at the holiday because people want to have stuff, and there are options out there. That's the thing, is there are so many good recipes out there. And I've started, when you first start this transition, it seems like you're in the kitchen forever. It really does. So one of the things that I teach people is that the tools you have in your kitchen are going to be your best friends. They're going to save you a lot of time. But there's also other options. If you've got the money to be able to buy your pre-cut food, fruit and vegetables. And I mean, you can buy cubed sweet potatoes and cubed butternut squash and diced onions and diced up stuff to put on your salads now for chopped salads. And so if you have the money to purchase those things, then by all means, that will save you an infinite amount of time. Having your food prepped in advance, I know it seems like wasting one day of your time, or, a good chunk of a day of your time to prep some of those things. But that is the way that we succeed. When we go to the kitchen and open that fridge and we have pre-cut vegetables, pre-cut whatever, rice is already made, quinoa is already made, your vegetables are washed and everything, then it's just a matter of throwing it onto a plate and eating it. And so I try and teach them that. And then I also, when I have people come to me looking to transition and really struggling, I just tell them, I said, look, I'm not asking you to give up your meat and your dairy right now. I'm asking you to cut the quantity and add more vegetables in. So if that means throwing a salad or throwing a bowl of soup before your main meal, then you do that, because when you fill your stomach up, you're going to eat less of the foods that you shouldn't be eating to begin with. And so, make your plate half non-starchy vegetables, and then make your plate with starches, the rest of it with starches and fruits, and that's how you should start to eat your meals. And so I love potatoes and I love legumes, and the higher fiber you get in your diet, the more disease-free you're going to be. So that's the ultimate goal. But let's just kind of add more vegetables and fruit into our diet and kind of squeeze out the meat and the dairy.
So you've obviously developed some new habits and you've broken some bad habits.
Oh, yeah.
What are some habits that you've picked up along the way, and what are some bad ones that you've finally been able to give up?
So, the habits are, I've learned to really enjoy fruit. That was a really hard one. First time I met Robbie out in Hollywood, at the farmer's market out there, he took me around right before I started the program. He took me around and he was like, showing me all the fruits and this and that. And I was just like, I was in denial. You can eat fruit? No, you can't eat fruit. I was told I can only have a green apple from my diabetic counselor, and with nut butter to begin with, so I had a tough time teaching myself and getting into the habit of eating fruit, because fruit is so good for us. I mean, Robbie lives a healthy life on just fruit. I can't do it. I'm more of a savory girl. I like comfort foods. And so I had to teach myself how to learn to make the things that I liked differently and create new habits. I had to also create the habit of exercise, getting up and moving my body. And from that, you just flourish. I mean, I get out there. I remember the first time we were on a trip. We host trips, and we were on a trip down in Mexico, and I took the land people and we went to one of the ruins there. And I sat looking up at this ruins and I thought, there's no way I can do it. As good as I feel, there's just no way I can do it. I mean, I haven't done it in, 40 years. I looked at things from a distance. I never attempted them because I knew I couldn't do it and I didn't want to be embarrassed and whatnot. But this time I decided to crawl up it. And mind you, there were small steps, small as in the size, they were half the size of my foot. So I was getting just the front part of my foot anchored on it as I stepped up. I was in flip-flops. It was 90 some degrees out and humid, 80% humidity. So slippery, but I scaled all the way up there. And I stood at the top and I cried. I just couldn't believe that I could do it. And then I stood for another half an hour looking down going, well, now what do I do? How am I going to get down from here? It was good to get up, but how am I getting down? So, but just getting out and exercising, riding bicycles, swimming, doing things that I enjoyed, kayaking, being out in the nature, that was all habits and things that I had to teach myself again. I had to make it a priority. I had to make it a habit. And kind of COVID kind of took us away from that somewhat. And so now we're having to create those habits again. So I forgot what the rest of the question was.
What were some habits that you developed, and what were some habits that you had to break that have occurred over time? And I think you answered that, but if you have more to add to that, we can start here.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So one of the habits that I had to break was I used to bring in candies and sweets, and I would hide them all over my house. And so that my kids couldn't have them. They were just for mom. They were mom's special treats, and that was really hard to do in the beginning. I was still bringing stuff in that I should not have eaten. And I was a closet eater. I hid that, so everybody thought, oh, mom's doing really good. But mom really was struggling. So that was one of the habits I had to learn to change, as well as I had to incorporate some good habits into my life, which was eating fruit more frequently and exercising more frequently too.
All right. And then one final question. If someone were to walk up to you tomorrow, someone who desperately wants to lose weight, who is willing and open to a plant-based diet, what would you tell that person?
I would tell them that they're doing the best thing that they could for themselves. Taking that step to become plant-based is a big step. It's a big hurdle. It's like standing on the top of a cliff and everybody's jumping into the water and you're afraid to jump in. You just need to take that leap of faith, because the end result is going to be, you're going to have more energy than you ever imagined. I felt 20 years younger. I was doing things. I kind of picked up my life where I left it off in my late 20s, early 30s, and I was in my 50s now. So you're going to get more energy. You're going to get your life back. You're getting a second chance at health. And then, know what your why is. And for me, my why is I do not want to grow old in a doctor's office. I don't want to have to keep going back and forth to the doctor. I don't want to have to call my friends and say, I can't make it to lunch today because I don't feel so good, and just stay in bed for the day. That's not my objective. It may have been at one point in my life, but I know now that this lifestyle offers us a second chance at a quality life. And the energy is incredible. And to take it at your own pace. And just like I said earlier, you want to add more of the things in, the vegetables and the fruits and the nuts and seeds, add those in and kind of squeeze out the other stuff until you're ready to go 100%. Take it at your pace, but always make goals and steps towards that direction.
And before we end, tell us the name of your Facebook group again.
For the Health of a Tami, and I can be found on Instagram, which is all My Food Only that is on that page, and I can be found on Facebook.
Wonderful. Tami, thank you so much for being here today. I know that many people will be inspired after listening to your story.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you for all that you're doing out there. I appreciate that too. That's how we get this going and we get this revolution moving.
Yeah, absolutely.